In the gentle afternoon light of the mouse village square, Zeff and Sati walked slowly along the cobblestone path, their hands loosely joined, the warm scent of baked grain and herbs drifting through the air from nearby shops. And as they approached the village fountain, a low, soulful guitar drifted slowly towards them. The sound was a blues melody, and it seemed to roll through the square like a quiet river. And there, beneath a shade tree, sat Doobie, the blue jay busker, wearing his worn Stetson hat and an old acoustic guitar resting against his chest. A small tip jar on the ground beside him, and a mug of his favorite butterbeer nearby. Doobie's eyes were half closed as his fingers wandered across the strings, playing something that sounded both a little sad and somehow peaceful at the same time. Sati smiled softly and squeezed Zeff's hand as she listened for a moment. And then she said, "Oh, Zeff, that music is lovely, but I must stop by the herbal shop before it closes. I need a few roots and leaves for my medicine work." Zeff nodded, his eyes still resting on the musician, as he replied with an easy, country warmth, "Well, darling, you go right on and get what you need. I reckon I'll just sit here a spell and listen to this fella play." Sati gave Zeff a small smile before walking toward the herbal shop down the street. Zeff found a wooden bench near the tree, and he moved it closer so he could sit quietly while Doobie's guitar spoke its slow language, the notes bending and sliding like wind through tall grass. There were a few villagers passing by, some nodding quietly and kindly, others barely noticing. After a few minutes, there was a sharply dressed mouse. He hurried by, and he glanced down at the blue jay with a thin frown. And then he muttered loudly enough to be heard, "Why don't you just get a real job?" And without pausing his rhythm, Doobie simply kept playing, his fingers rolling through the chords as if the remark was just another breeze passing through the square. The rude mouse continued on his way, leaving the words hanging briefly in the air before they faded into the music. And Zeff watched the blue jay for just a moment before leaning forward a little and saying gently, "That didn't seem very kind. How did that land on you, my friend?" Doobie let the last note ring for a moment before giving a small, gravelly chuckle, his voice deep and worn like old wood. "Ah, brother, people toss stones when their pockets are full of pain," he said. then picking out another quiet chord. If I tried to catch every stone thrown my way, my hands wouldn't be free to play. Zeff tilted his head slightly, listening as Doobie continued, his guitar murmuring softly beneath his words. Truth is, everybody's hurting about something. Some folks carry it quiet, but others, they toss it at strangers. He shrugged lightly. But I ain't gonna let that stick in my heart. Music's where I sent that pain and that hurt. I turned it into something that breathes instead of something that poisons. Zeff smiled slowly and nodded, saying, So you're saying that the music keeps the heart clean? Doobie grinned a little beneath the brim of his hat and said, That's right, brother. If I let every sour word settle in me, the song would turn bitter. And the world's already got enough bitter songs. Then Doobie leaned back slightly, and he began to play something more rhythmic now. It was a playful acoustic blues groove, and it danced lightly across the square. Before long, Sati returned from the herbal shop. She was carrying a small bundle of wrapped herbs in her paws, and she stopped beside Zeff as the music reached her ears, her eyes lighting up as she listened to the lively rhythm. When he saw her, Zeff stood up with a warm grin and said softly, Well now, sounds like the afternoon's asking for a little dancing. Sati laughed gently as he took her hand and led her a few steps into the open space beside the bench. And as Doobie's guitar picked up a cheerful, bouncing rhythm, the two began to dance. It was a simple village jig, light steps and laughter swirling together while the blue jay Busker smiled quietly and played on. The music was steady, pulsing, ringing bright beneath the shade tree as villagers slowed to watch, and the square filled with the easy joy of a song carried by a quiet heart.